How many of you loved math growing up? Brilliant, brilliant. That's good. Math is one of the most powerful indicators for intelligence and problem solving in the world. And that's why it's such an important course. And one of the reasons why it's such an important and incredible concept is its ability to dimensionalize. There's an accuracy with math that you don't get in any other subject. And that's why it's possible for you to get 100 over 100 in math, unlike English language where, you barely can go past the 50 mark because of how subjective it can be. But for mathematics, it's very specific, it's very accurate. Typically, mathematics deals with variables, formulas, and then answers. So typically, you'd see mathematical equations that provide some form of leeway and help with either a variable, a formula, and then they will withdraw one of those particular elements. Maybe an answer is missing, or maybe a variable is missing and there's an answer, or a formula is missing and there are variables and an answer, so they can figure out the interrelationship. So that's what a formula is pretty much, to help you figure out the interrelationship between dynamic variables. Now, the interesting thing about math is how generous it is in providing some of these elements that will help you navigate to an answer, which could be X or any other thing. But life is not as generous as mathematics. Just like I said, whilst math gives you variables, formulas, and asks you to figure out an answer, life just throws you into a puddle of a sea of variables and then doesn't give you any formula, but is far more nagging than mathematics because it keeps demanding an answer from you. It doesn't give you anything to work with. You're thrown into this world. Nobody gave you a blueprint of how to figure out your life from the day you were born. It's something you have to literally navigate as you go through life, one step after the other. And that can be a very overwhelming exercise or ordeal. But I'll share a story. I got the approval from my wife to share this story. And it's the story of how I once found my ex. But this ex is with an E before it's X. All right. This was several years ago. I was at Abuja to get a project started. And then it was about this time of the year. It was in February. And I thought it was a great idea to impress the lady that I liked at the time by going to her school. And at the time, she didn't have a phone. Her phone was either bad or lost. And so she was unreachable. So I thought it was a brilliant idea to leave Abuja, pass through my school, OAU, and then go all the way to Lagos, Unilag, to see this person that I was trying to impress. Now, she had no phone. I couldn't reach her. She didn't know I was coming. So it was not like we prearranged a rendezvous. But then I showed up there and I said to myself, how in the world am I going to locate this one person, my ex, remember, in this, campus with over 30,000 students and just an unlimited number of possible routes and positions where she could possibly be. So I told myself in one moment of, should I say maybe epiphany now, I told myself, I said, I will move in a straight line. I told myself, I will move in a straight line, and wherever she could be on this campus, she will find her way to my front. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I will just keep moving in a straight line. I won't move to the left, I won't move to the right. But wherever I get to, eventually I'll be looking in front of me, and I will find her in front of me. And that's exactly what happened. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And I'm not telling you something that someone told me. I lived it. I moved from the gate and I kept walking straight for about 2 kilometers. And right there she was in front of me without any prior conversation, no phone call. There was no way we could have planned it, but it happened to me. And a lot of times as we, leverage that principle or that story to our lives, I realized that as much as we may not always have the variables, like I said, life is not as generous as mathematics is. It doesn't give us the variables, it doesn't supply us the formulas, but it keeps nagging us for answers. As much as that can be the case, the truth is, if you will keep walking in a straight line, and by straight line I mean, if you're going to be very deliberate about the decisions you're making on an everyday basis, if you're not going to be a twisted, bent, cheating, lying person, if you're going to just stay straight and upright and stand tall with a level of contentment in who you are without trying to bend the fabric of history, because what it means to lie is really to bend the fabric of history, is to try to change history, and that's impossible. And so every time you successfully lie, what you've done is that you have attempted to bend into bits the very fabric of history, which life itself will use to whip you in the end, because there is no one that has ever been able to successfully deceive life. And that's exactly what people try to do when they don't walk on a straight line. And that's what you do when you say you're going to deliver this job, but you don't get to do it. When you say you're going to show up for someone, but you don't get to show up. When you say you're going to be there and you're going to be there late. When you don't walk on a straight line, chances are that you are trying to cheat a life that has never lost a single battle in its history. And so it is important that you recognize that how you find X really is by starting to walk on a straight line. As I begin to round off my thoughts this afternoon, I'll be sharing with you 3 profound, important elements or principles that you can begin to leverage in finding your X in whatever context you found yourself. We've heard brilliant speakers throughout the day, footballers, comedians, animators, brilliant politicians, and filmmakers. But your story might be very different from theirs. The chances are that you're not exactly on the path that they are on. But these 3 principles that I'm about to share with you, if you would apply it in your own context, you will find your X. The first thing is to prioritize action over accuracy. And if you notice in many of the things that the speakers have said, you would observe that there is this sense of just start, just move, just do something. Stop waiting to figure everything out. Data analytics is a big deal right now. The ability to observe data, databases. And the reason why we're so obsessed with data is because of its ability to predict the future. We want to be sure that there's no risk in the future, but it's an impossible task. It's impossible to eliminate the risk in the future to 0. It's practically impossible because all the data sets you're using to do all your data analytics, they are all in the history. They are all in the past. So there is no way you're going to be able to eliminate the risk in your future to 0. The only way you can attempt to see that successful dream in your mind come to pass is if you would at least start. If I had stayed in Abuja or stayed at the gates, there's no way I would have seen that X that day. Remember, I had to stay steady in my decision to make moves at the very least. All right? If you will make moves, you may lose, but you just might not lose. And if it is just for that slim chance of success, how about you just try and make a move? Don't overanalyze and overanalyze and overanalyze until you're paralyzed. And it's important that you recognize that the more you analyze and analyze, you are literally just feeding the fear that will keep you grounded from moving. So know when you've analyzed enough and know when to move. Prioritize actions over accuracy. Number 2, it is important that you learn to be iteratively agile. And like one of the speakers said, I think it was Ajebo, the last speaker, he talked about organizations that literally stumbled on the product that has now made them global stars, which is also why it's important to prioritize actions over accuracy, because many of these global brands today, what they are known for today is not what they started out to do. But the fact that they started out showed that they were willing to experiment, to get feedback from the market, and now they've somehow or the other stumbled into success. For example, Samsung started out as a food trading company. You wouldn't even believe it. Today they are known for electronics, for semiconductors, and for mobile phones. Twitter started out as a podcasting platform. Today, they're one of the biggest micro-blogging platforms in the world. Instagram started out as a location check-in app, which was very complicated. The engagement was low, so many features, people couldn't figure it out. Today, they're one of the biggest social media platforms in the world. Many of these things, and of course, we know the story of Netflix and Amazon. Many of the things that they're known for today was not what they started out. But the truth is that they would never arrive at where they are today if they never started out. So again, prioritize actions over accuracy, but more than that, also be very iteratively agile. Be willing to look out for the evidence and the feedback from the market and get a sense of what the market is saying and be willing to adapt and evolve as you receive those feedback from the market. It is important that you recognize that as much as you love your product, you are not the market. You may be the producer, you may be the business owner, but you are not your own market. Because I see people sometimes, they talk about how brilliant their product is, how fantastic their fashion outfit is, how great their outfit is and all of that. But nobody has checked it out in 6 months. Don't you think you should do something about the design? Don't you think you should ask questions from your potential customers and just check what might you have liked if I had done it the way you wanted? How about you ask questions and be iteratively agile? Charles Darwin said it's not the strongest of species that survive. It's not the most intelligent that survive. It's the most responsive to change. It's the most adaptable. It's the ones that have survived several eras and dispensations of change and different temperatures and altitudes. You may be the dragon, but you may not survive much longer if you're not adaptable. No matter how big you are, you need to be nimble, you need to be iterative, you need to be agile. Kodak has a very interesting story of how their own engineer created the digital photography, all right? But they were too scared to launch it into the world because they were afraid of losing what they had already secured in the past. Be more committed to your evolving future than you are to the rigid past. So be very iteratively agile. And that's how you'll be able to take advantage of the frontiers that your giftings and your talents will inevitably unlock into the future. And then finally, have what is called passionate pursuit. You see, we live in a world that is very obsessed with destinations and outcomes and goals and results. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those things keep us incentivized and keep us excited about going up every day, getting on the grind, and achieving great success. But I would say that it's important to fall in love even more with the journey and the everyday, much more than the ultimate success. Because I've observed that those that get so obsessed with the destination, it's called a destination disease. Those that get so obsessed with the destination and the outcome and the goal, they tend to sacrifice everything that matters on their way there. So it's not unusual to find people like that. You see their trail, it is filled and littered with all kinds of broken relationships, bad health, terrible relationships with people that actually matter in their lives because they sacrificed everything that mattered for that one obsessive goal, which is not even guaranteed in the end. How about you actually enjoy the process? Because if you enjoy the process, even when you fail, you would have become someone better, even with the failure, because you don't lose once you fall in love with the experiences and the evolution of who you are actually becoming. And so beyond the obsessive destination, how about you become passionate about the journey itself? Be passionate about the entire evolution of your experiences on this side of the divide, because you will not have it all figured out. You will not have the formulas, you will not have all the variables, but life will constantly keep demanding that you provide answers, that you find X. And the truth is, if you have attached your X to the destination and it does not happen, you're already doomed to fail. But how about you attach the X to the journey, so that whatever outcome you arrive at, somehow or the other you win, because your X was not in a specific outcome, but in the quality of person you're becoming. You walk on a straight line, you prioritize actions over accuracy, you ensure that you have iterative agility, and then you love the pursuit of your journey much more than obsess over the destination. And you will find your X. God bless you. Thank you very much.